Good evening, everyone. Here is Geraldo Lemos Neto, Geraldinho Lemos, and I'm here with Marco Gandra, live from Belo Horizonte, Brazil, to the program To Know Spiritism number 21. We are studying presently the book The Genesis, the Miracles, and the Predictions According to Spiritism by Allan Kardec. Last 2 weeks, we studied the first chapter of the book, The Character of the Spiritist Doctrine, and today we are going to study the second part of the book that is related to the Genesis. As we already know, the book has 4 parts materially. The first one that we studied the last 2 weeks, the character of the Spiritist revelation. The second one is the Genesis that we are going to see today. And the third one is the miracles, and the last and fourth one is the predictions, or the mediumship of foresee, or the mediumship to know the future. But this is not our study today. Today we are going to see what Allan Kardec studied about the formation of our planet Earth, the formation of the initiation of life here on Earth, but only in the big picture. We are not going to go through details. We are just gonna see the steps that Allan Kardec showed us about those points. About the Genesis, we will see in this book the role of science in Genesis. Allan Kardec is most assertive that science must prevail. The knowledge that come from the scientists, the ones that study life on Earth, must prevail over all kinds of other interpretations, so that the role of science is determined to prevail in the matter of the Genesis. He will also study the ancient and the modern world systems. He will compare those systems. He will show us the ancient system of beliefs according to the Genesis and how childish they were related to our nowadays knowledge, our scientific knowledge. In this chapter, in this part, not a chapter, because there are many chapters on this matter, on this subject. In this chapter, he will also study, in this part, he will also study the general uranography. That is a part very important because it was given by Camille Flammarion himself. And Camille Flammarion received by his mediumship the teachings from Galileo Galilei. And some of us already know that Galileo Galilei is, in a matter of fact, the previous life from Camille Flammarion, and those communications, those studies that were transmitted through Camille Flammarion were not from a spiritual world, but was from anemic manifestation. But nevertheless, those information about astronomy, about astrophysics, those information were very important to us to understand our place in the universe, the place of Earth in the solar systems, and the place of the solar system in our galaxy. Allan Kardec also will study the geological sketch of the Earth, how we, through science, can understand the movement of the geological system on Earth, the tectonic plates and the eras of formation, the formation of the atmosphere, the formation of the oceans, the formation of the continents, and so on. All the geological eras that passed till this day, so that nowadays we have a relatively ambience that favors life. He also will study the theories about the formation of the earth. Of course, Allan Kardec himself states that those are theories because at that time most of the things that he was studying were not proved yet. Some of them, or most of them, in those 160 some years have already been proved. He also will study the globe revolutions, the position of Earth in those astronomical movements, the translation, the rotation of Earth, the precession of the equinoxes, everything that relates to astronomy in the big picture and also in the picture smaller related to Earth, he will study. Another point of very good interest, very important interest, is the organic genesis, how life came to be, how it started in here on Earth, and so also he will study those things. Of course, we can understand that some more than a century and a half has passed since he published this book, and so because of that we can understand most or many things nowadays has a more comprehensive, a more broad horizon of comprehension than the one that Allan Kardec himself had at that time. Because, of course, the scientific world has evolved a big deal since the mid-19th century. And after the organic genesis, Allan Kardec will study the spiritual genesis. That is a focus of most interest for us spiritists. The evolution of the soul, the evolution of the spirit. We can understand that we all, as creatures, were created by God simple and ignorant, and that we will evolve through the ages, through the millennia, step by step, until we reach the condition that we have nowadays, that is the condition to be a human spirit. And also we can understand that the evolution does not stop here, that we are in a continuum mode to development, to evolution, so that in one day we can reach the step or the plan that our Lord Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ himself live on, that the condition of an angel, angelic beings, that the next step in our evolution. And of course, also Allan Kardec will study the Mosaic Genesis and will show us that the Mosaic Genesis was, in a matter of comparison, a more childish understanding of the word, because at that time, the time of Moses, the knowledge, especially the spiritual and the scientific knowledge, were so little that he could not transmit his knowledge or his wisdom in a more amplified way, right? And because of that, we can see, please, in the next slide, first in to focuses on the Genesis. Allan Kardec will study the origin and the development of beings, and second, he will study the set of facts or elements that contributed to produce something. And this something, of course, we are talking about not only the material world, the physical world that were produced through the genesis of our planet and our solar system and our galaxy, but also there's something related to the spirit that were produced, were created by God, the spiritual genesis. And in the chapter relating the Mosaic Genesis to the scientific Genesis that we understand nowadays through the evolution of Charles Darwin, and he will relate the relationship between Spiritism and the scriptures, and the Old Testament. Of course, the first book of the Old Testament were and is the Genesis, the Mosaic Genesis, the book of the Genesis by Moses. And Allan Kardec will show us that the Genesis from that the Spiritism doctrine, the Spiritism revelation will adopt is the Genesis from the angle of secure knowledge, is the Genesis from the scientific angle, because it's been proved that way. And because of that, we can understand, like in the item 4, chapter 12, Allan Kardec states, as soon as it was based on the experimental method, science felt stronger and emancipated. Today, it is science that controls the Bible. He shows us that as a matter of development of the society, the human society, that there came a time, especially in the 17th century, where science took a step forward. And that was that first step was by the works of René Descartes in France, and when he himself studied and published his first work about the method of science, the scientific method. And that was a very important step because it inaugurates a way of experiment and test all the ideas and conduct all the studies that revealed the laws of nature. And this experimental method bring about the modern science. And because of that, science felt stronger and took a more important role in the human society and was emancipated from religion at that time. Because at that time, the Roman Catholic uh, organization were the center of all knowledge. And after that time, science was emancipated from the guidance from the Pope and from the cardinals and from the bishops or archbishops, and they uh, continued their development in a parallel path, not in the same path. And after this emancipation, we can for sure state that nowadays science controls all the knowledge of the Bible. It's not the other way around. It's not the Bible and the scriptures that controls the scientific knowledge. It's the knowledge that came through the efforts of science, to the efforts of all scientists that now can explain those symbols and those explanations and those statements that we have in the Bible. In the chapter 12, item 12, Allan Kardec states, "Let us not reject the biblical Genesis. Instead, study it as if studying the history of the childhood of the peoples." Allan Kardec is very clear about that. The Mosaic Genesis is a symbol that was up to the childhood of those people of that time, 1500 years before Christ. Uh, and they could not understand more than Moses wrote. So it was a time of the childhood of the spiritual and the childhood of the scientific knowledge. And we do not reject them at all. It's not one thing that we just put aside, but all those biblical Genesis statements like the world were created in 7 days and so on. There were a first man that was Adam, and Eva was the first woman, so that those are symbols that we can understand and comprehend through the scientific knowledge nowadays. And this is very important because this is how Spiritism, the Spiritist revelation, understand the process of the revelation of the Genesis. And as I already told you, Allan Kardec himself states that the scientific revelation about the Genesis, the material Genesis and the spiritual Genesis must be governed, must be guided by this scientific knowledge and not just a biblical knowledge. It's not the other way around. And also in another chapter, the chapter 16, item 17, Allan Kardec states, "It is probable that the veiled form had at a certain time its reason for being and even its necessity. However, today the circumstances are different. Uh, Again, he is stating that at that time it was in the matter of understanding all the things relating to life, to creation. It was necessary that those people, the Jewish people at that time, had to receive this first revelation of Moses as a child received the milk of her mother, and after being in the process of evolution, after passing through adolescence, after passing through youth, and achieving a mature age, of course, the being is up to a better uh, alimentation, better food. It's not only uh, strict to milk, right? That's just a comparison. And nowadays, it was necessary at that time. It has its reasons, but nowadays it doesn't make sense just to relate to create to the biblical creation or the biblical Genesis to understand the creation. We have to understand the creation through the eyes of the scientific knowledge. And those are the chapters that Allan Kardec talks and teaches us about the Genesis. Chapter 1, Chapter 4, Chapter 6, Chapter 11, Chapter 12, Chapter 13, and also Chapter uh, 12. Okay. Those are the chapters that are related to the Genesis. Let's see if we have something else. No, that's it for today. Thank you so much for being with us. I'd like to thank you so much and hope to see you next week. Bye bye.